Now, welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where once again we're going to try to do a sort of rapid lightning response video where I try to answer a bunch of questions, the ones that are left on the other lightning response videos, as quickly as I possibly can, which isn't always all that quickly considering how much I like to ramble. And as I've done before, I'm going to bring in my wife for this one, Sailor Naboo. We have a channel together, as a lot of you know, so if you enjoy this video, you might want to go check out that channel and you might just like what you find there. Anyway, she's picked out a few questions for me to answer or for us to discuss, but before we can do any of that, just let me give a big thank you to everyone who does leave questions on these videos. There is always a ton of them, so apologies if we do not get to yours. Also, a huge thank you to everyone who supports our channels over on Patreon. We very much appreciate it. And now let's get to the first question.
Alright, first comment comes to us from Samwise Gamgee, and I might abbreviate this a little bit. Hey Thor, I was wondering what you thought about the changes Jar Jar Binks underwent in Star Wars The Clone Wars TV show. I know you spoke on it briefly in your Heroes and Villains video, but I haven't heard many people speak of it fully. I think Dave Filoni and his team did pretty well, making him more three-dimensional and slightly more serious without abandoning some of his more comical elements. Personally, it was in episodes like these that disappeared, except for the other reasons we need to get into, that really won Jar Jar over as one of my favorite characters in all Star Wars, and I think that if we had gotten more of that version of the character in the prequels, probably going more serious as the trilogy went on, fewer people might have objected to his existence.
Yeah, I've always found it strange, and I've talked about it before, how George Lucas, with like the first all CGI kind of character that was actually like a co-star in the movie, if you will, that he went so over the top and comedic with him. It's like here you have a character that's completely 100% animated. I mean, yes, motion capture behind it, don't get me wrong. But you kind of made him stick out like a sore thumb by having him being so funny. And you almost wish they would have just toned him down to try to just make him blend into the movie, because he sticks out not because of the way he looks. I mean, you could even go back almost 25 years later and The Phantom Menace with Jar Jar looks pretty damn good. But he's so comedic that you can't help but notice how out of place he is sometimes.
He's almost a bad representation then of his entire species, because even when you get to see Boss Nass, you kind of chuckle at him because he does the funny blur
Yeah,
stuff.
Boss Nass was a little strange too. I mean, you got like Captain Tarples and some of the others who feel a little more quote-unquote normal. But yeah, it's so strange that he took all these CGI characters and wanted them to be so animated. I mean, that's part of the fun of Star Wars. Like, there is, it can be a little over the top and fun and silly, don't get me wrong. But here you are kind of showcasing this new technology and you're making it kind of stand out. And I do agree, in Clone Wars, he's better because he has more intent and purpose, as you kind of point out. Instead of just being the guy along for the ride, he's actually going on missions in some cases. He's doing things. And yes, he does still have his clumsy moments, but I think the intent helps him. He's toned down a little bit for the most part in many of the episodes he's in. And I do think he would have been toned down had he continued to be featured in the trilogy. Of course, as we know, George Lucas did kind of caved to fan reaction and kind of lessened his role in the films. So I think even in episode 2, the little bit we see him, he's not, clumsy and running around goofy. He has his couple moments, he has his couple lines, and he clearly had a more serious role intended for down the road.
Speaking of that, we have another question that ties into this from Running Bald Man. Hey Thor, have you ever done a video on the Darth Jar Jar theory?
I was just gonna get into that too, and I've done videos on that. I think I'm in the minority of people who don't think that was ever intended to be a thing. The greatest piece of evidence people tend to use, and there's a lot of little evidence out there, don't get me wrong, but they'll use the quote where George Lucas said that Jar Jar is the key to all this, and they'll conveniently leave off what comes next or what George Lucas says next, which is because he's a funnier character than we've ever had before.
Jar Jar is a key to all this. If we get Jar Jar working, because he's a funnier character than we've ever had in any of the movies before.
Meaning he wasn't talking about him working as in terms of story, he was worried about him working as in terms of on screen, would the fans buy it, which again goes back to what I said moments ago about how weird it is that he did go so over the top with him. But no, I'm not a firm believer in the Darth Jar Jar theory. It's fun. It's a fun theory, but I don't think that was ever Lucas's intent.
Next from Bram Duracourt. Hey Thor, do you think that maybe people put Dave Filoni on a pedestal too much? Ever since Disney took over, a lot of people have been praising him since he's earnestly passionate about Star Wars, but I've also seen increasingly many people point out how he overwrote a lot of older work, how he included some very divisive or bad plot elements, the Clone Wars brain chips, the entire Book of Boba Fett, Luke's stance on attachments, etc., and how he really pushes his own characters to the forefront. Before the Tales of the Jedi, he also supposedly really watered down Dooku's character. Do you think that maybe because most Disney stuff hasn't been very good, people overlook his less stellar work, since they view him as something of a last hope, so to speak? Marvel fans had that with Feige for a while, and it's really letting them down now.
I mean, I don't think Filoni is infallible, right? I think he's certainly made a lot of mistakes. I think he's done a lot of things really well. I mean, some of the examples you use here, like the brain chips, I'm not sure that doesn't come from Lucas or just helps explain why the clone troopers did indeed turn. I mean, you go 5-6 seasons of the Clone Wars and you really see the connection between the Jedi and the clones, and then you watch Revenge of the Sith and you see Cody like, oh, yep, execute Order 66, fire without a second thought. And you're like, well, would he really do that? And I understand they're created to follow any orders, but we've certainly seen them question orders before. Just look at the Umbara arc. We are seeing the evolution of the clones. So you have to find a way to explain why they just all fire without a second thought.
Not to mention there were clone deserters.
Yeah, there's clone deserters. So we know that they're not it's not a 100% infallible that they are going to follow any order, right? We've seen the evolution of them. So you get to this point where you have to explain why none of them question any of the orders and just wipe out all the Jedi. And for better or worse, you come up with brain chips. As for Book of Boba Fett, that's not Filoni's work. He doesn't really have anything to do with that. And I am a staunch defender of Luke giving Grogu the choice and holding true to attachments in that particular case. I've done a whole video on that. For me, him giving the option to Grogu is a huge advancement. Back in the day, the Jedi didn't really sit you down and say, well, now that you got a taste of what it's like to be a Jedi, do you want to stay or do you want to go? They just assumed you wanted to stay unless you decided to go. So it's Luke kind of doing the best of both worlds. It's him seeing what happened to his father, who fell because of attachments, and it's him realizing that, sometimes people have good friends and family and they love people, which doesn't necessarily mean you are totally attached to them, but sometimes you just want to make another choice, and you are given that choice, or Luke is given Grogu that choice. So I kind of like that.
Next comment from Von Sowords. Hey Thor, is Lucasfilm stuck in a rut of only ever being able to make things George Lucas created? Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Willow, maybe American Graffiti or Labyrinth. I'm not adding in my 2 cents. Strange magic.
Oh yes, don't forget Strange Magic.
Can Lucasfilm create something new, or even acquire the rights to an existing IP? Or would it be out of place because Lucas never had a hand in it? For instance, if George Lucas still headed the company and bought the rights to, say, the Legend of Zelda movies, then would that be fitting as a Lucasfilm brand? But if Lucasfilm bought the rights to Legends of Zelda, what justifies it as a Lucas film? I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and what kind of story do you think could be a new and fitting addition to the Lucasfilm brand?
Wow, there's a lot of different takeaways or things you could go with here, including the fact that you're asking, can Lucasfilm buy IPs and then use them? Would that be right? When that's kind of what happened to Lucasfilm, isn't it?
Yes.
And we've seen how that's kind of gone. I mean, I think even Disney has acknowledged, even Bob Iger has acknowledged that they bought Lucasfilm for basically Star Wars. I mentioned in my Indiana Jones video the other day, they didn't even value that. That wasn't even factored in when they were buying Lucasfilm. It was kind of like, oh yeah, we get that too. And I'm sure that goes for Willow as well. They bought Star Wars. They didn't really... Yes, there's other things that goes along with Lucasfilm. Don't get me wrong, that they also purchased. But I think Lucasfilm is just known for Star Wars. I think Lucas... Strange Magic, you pointed it out. Other things, Willow, he tried to do other things, didn't really catch on. Because I think that's what people want out of it. I don't think you're thinking anything but Star Wars when you hear the name Lucasfilm, or maybe Indiana Jones too, of course.
I think if he acquired another franchise and tried to make it his own, that's the same thing that Disney's trying to do, and I don't know if it would be successful.
Yeah,
because Disney's not being very successful, and they have quite the resources to try to be successful.
Yeah, I think there's always trouble when you try to purchase something and make it your own, especially when your main intent is making money, right? Which, of course, that's what Hollywood and entertainment tries to do. It'd be one thing if, say, George Lucas in some weird reality was a huge fan of The Legend of Zelda. He's probably never played it, never really heard of it. And he wanted to buy it just to make it, and he didn't really care about profits, and he gave us the best Legend of Zelda movie ever. But I think it's just a different story in Hollywood these days, that it's all about buying these franchises because of the money-making potential in them, not because you want to give fans stories in these universes. You're just trying to make money. So I mean, as much as I love Star Wars and several other franchises, I think some of them just need to run their course and we need to move on to new things. I think we are just recycling everything nowadays. I think that I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think the world is ripe, or the time is right for something else to come along that just captures everybody. I mean, look at like Harry Potter 20 years ago, 25 years ago, just took the world by storm. We haven't had anything like that since Harry Potter.
I feel like that's what streaming services are trying to do.
Well, they're all trying to get on the franchise. They're not exactly just trying to make something creative and then hopefully it takes off. They're trying to make something that they think will take off.
Well, that's what Rebel Moon is hoping for.
Yeah. And
Rebel Moon is trying to be its own original franchise. Zack Snyder says he's got a million ideas for the world he's building, and that could be Netflix's franchise show.
It could be. I guess what I'm saying is like Star Wars was made kind of, this is the thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second, this was really good, and then he ran with it. Mm-hmm. I think you got to really just focus on making one good story instead of like, and I'm not saying Rebel Moon and Zack Snyder is wrong for doing it this way, but I think you really got to focus on, I'm just going to tell one really good story, and if people really gravitate towards it and they really love it, maybe then I can move on. Don't think about like trying to make a million stories all at once and planning 20 years down the road when you got to get people to watch and love what you first create.
Next comment from Superior Dan. Hey Thor, if the concept of Grey Jedi, or a mix of the light and dark, was never a thing in Star Wars, then what are your thoughts on Mace Windu supposedly having a purple lightsaber to reflect his use of dark and light?
That came after the fact. After Samuel L. Jackson asked George Lucas, could he have a purple lightsaber, and George gave in to him. Mm-hmm. Originally, he was never supposed to have that. And so, obviously, George said yes, and then people, I think, took that, oh, look, it's purple, it's blue and red, he must have a little darkness in him. And I think that was, people after the fact kind of running with that idea just based off a lightsaber. So I don't really think it means anything in terms of Grey Jedi, especially when it comes from Lucas. He was just giving in to Samuel L. Jackson, for better or worse.
Last comment is from Jared Locke. Hey Thor, big fan of your channel. Your reviews and analysis are insightful, balanced, and intelligent. I was thinking, since you play D&D, it would be cool to hear your thoughts on the game aspects, rules, classes, etc. Have you ever considered discussing D&D on this or another channel? Follow-up. How would you build your Darth Vader in D&D 5e?
I'd make him a paladin.
Corrupted paladin?
Corrupted paladin, yeah, absolutely.
I know you would.
You know exactly how I'd play him, too, because you know me too well when it comes to D&D.
Not some sort of a dark sorcerer?
No, nothing like that. No, he'd be corrupted paladin, absolutely. But no,
I have mage hand and force choke people with it.
Hell yeah. I mean, that would be cool too. But stop giving me ideas.
Oh, he'd be anyway. A paladin / sorcerer. Ooh. Or sorcerer paladin.
Interesting. But no, I love D&D. I've been playing it for over 30 years. I've been a DM almost that entire time, other than a few rare exceptions. So we have, I should say, talked about it a little bit on the other channel that we do together. We would love to talk more about D&D and games in general. We play a card game called Flesh and Blood. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it out there, but it is...
I was toying with the idea of turning the Sailor Naboo YouTube channel into a game channel.
Yeah, because we also play a lot of board games. Like, we do... Like, originally when I did the second channel, my intent was to kind of make it kind of like a collecting and game kind of thing, and then it became your channel, essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
Because you also have another channel that's yours, which is just... Yeah. It's just there. It's been there for like years. Yeah, but anyway... No, I would love to talk more about D&D. I have no idea how much people would be interested in us kind of doing a channel that talked almost exclusively about games. It'd be a lot of work. You work full-time at a quote-unquote real job.
It is a real job.
No, I mean, quote-unquote, yeah, I'm making fun of my job. But
yeah, because I was like, no, I have a real job.
No, your job is the real job, but a quote-unquote, because, I mean, it was more intended to be a joke towards me and what I do. But no, this is, I mean, obviously YouTube, I do this full-time. You do the other channel along with me kind of full-time on top of your full-time. So not a lot of time to do it. So if people weren't really that interested, obviously we wouldn't want to put a ton of time and effort into it. But something we've considered, talking more about that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in that, well, let us know in the comments below.
We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, we will see. But for now, that's all we got for you this time. So... take to the comments below, tell us what you thought about any and all of these questions and what we had to say about them. Or you can always leave a question for a future lightning response video. Just start your comment off with "Hey Thor" and then ask your question. Whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.